Welcome to Dark Whispers, a place where the fog never fully lifts and the dense Appalachian woods hide stories too terrifying for the daylight. These are not tales of fiction or imagination. They're true accounts from people who live deep within the mountains, where roads end, cell signals vanish, and the line between reality and nightmare blurs. Each story carries the weight of fear, the chill of the unknown, and a lingering sense that something watches from just beyond the trees. Story 1. The Cabin in the Hollow. Marlene grew up in a remote hollow in West Virginia, surrounded by towering oaks and the constant hum of cicadas. Her family's cabin, built generations ago, sat at the edge of a small clearing. One night, she awoke to the sound of whispering outside her window, soft, guttural murmurs that seemed to echo from the forest itself. She peeked out and saw shadowy figures moving between the trees, too tall and thin to be human. Her father dismissed it as mountain ghosts. But the next morning, deep footprints in the mud led right up to the cabin and vanished into thin air. Story 2. The Screams of Pine Creek. Jake had lived his entire life along Pine Creek, a stream winding through North Carolina's rugged terrain. One evening, while fishing alone, he heard blood-curdling screams coming from deep within the woods. He assumed it was an animal until he noticed the patterns of the sound, like someone or something mimicking human pain. Compelled by a mix of fear and curiosity, he followed the echoes, only to find a clearing where ground was scorched and strange symbols were etched into the soil. He ran, never looking back, but the screams followed him for months in his dreams. Story 3. The Vanishing Road. In Kentucky, a man named Harris shared the tale of a road that appears only at night. Drivers report losing their way on familiar paths, ending up on a stretch that seems to have no exit. Harris recounted a terrifying night when he drove home late after a local festival. The road behind him disappeared, replaced by thick woods, and the headlights illuminated nothing but fog and twisted trees. Hours later, he somehow emerged miles from home, with the car's clock frozen at 3:33 a.m., though he had driven for hours. Locals say the road is a trap, a place where people vanish and are never found. Story 4. The Watcher on Bald Ridge. On Bald Ridge in Tennessee, a family reported seeing a figure that they called the Watcher. It stood atop the ridge for hours, motionless, eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. Their dogs would growl and refuse to go outside, but when the humans approached, the figure vanished. It wasn't human, they insisted. It moved too silently, and its limbs seemed too long, bending in unnatural ways. Some believe it a guardian of the mountains. Others whispered as a predator drawn to fear. Story 5. The Whispering Woods. Deep in the Virginia Appalachians, a young hiker named Lily had an experience that would haunt her forever. As she wandered, she began to hear faint whispers calling her name. At first, she thought it was the wind, but the whispers grew urgent, pleading. When she followed the sound, she found nothing but a circle of stones surrounding a shallow pit filled with bones. She ran, hearing the whispers multiply around her, as if the forest itself were alive and hunting her. These first 5 stories barely scratched the surface of the strange, disturbing reality that lies hidden in Appalachia. But even in this small sample, one thing is clear. In these mountains, isolation brings clarity, but also terror. The woods remember. They watch, and they do not forgive. The mountains of Appalachia keep their secrets well, but for those brave or unlucky enough to wander too far, the horrors are real and sometimes inescapable. Here are the final 3 true accounts from people who live where the roads end and the shadows begin. Story 6. The Girl in the Fog. In a remote hollow in North Carolina, a trucker named Sam was driving home late one rainy night when he saw a little girl standing alone by the side of the road. She wore a tattered dress, her face obscured by wet hair, and she pointed silently toward the mountains. Sam stopped, calling out to her, but she didn't move. When he stepped out to approach, she vanished into the fog, but the smell of wet earth and decay lingered. Weeks later, he learned of a family who had lived near that spot and disappeared without a trace decades ago. Locals say the fog claims anyone who notices too closely, and the girl is its lure. Story 7. The Crying Hollow. In West Virginia, a man named Lewis inherited an old cabin along a ridge known as Crying Hollow. The first night he stayed, he heard sobbing and low chanting, echoing through the valley. Thinking it was animals, he ignored it, but the sounds grew louder each night. Objects in the cabin would move on their own. Chairs overturned, doors opening and closing without wind. One night, he awoke to see a shadowy figure crouched in the corner, rocking back and forth and whispering his name. He fled the cabin that night, leaving everything behind. When he returned weeks later, the cabin was gone, replaced by untouched forest as if it had never existed. Story 8. The Mountain Howler. High in the Tennessee Smokies, hunters speak of the mountain howler, a creature that prowls the ridges at night. Greg, a lifelong hunter, had dismissed the stories until he camped alone one autumn. At midnight, a wailing sound split the air, a mix of human cries and animal growls. The trees shook violently, and he caught glimpses of a massive, shadowy figure moving with impossible speed. He fired his rifle, but the figure vanished, leaving only deep claw marks on nearby trees. He never camped alone again. Others claim the howler seeks out intruders, feeding on fear, leaving no trace except echoes in the mountains that never fade. These stories, though chilling, are not isolated events. Appalachia's deep hollows and hidden ridges have long been home to strange phenomena that defy explanation. From vanishing roads to whispering woods, the mountains themselves seem alive, watching those who dare to intrude. Those who live here quietly know to respect the forest, to travel lightly and quietly, and to avoid drawing attention after nightfall. A warning from the hollow. To the outsider, these mountains might seem serene, their beauty inviting. But those who live here understand a different truth. Darkness is thicker than you can imagine, and the woods remember every step, every whisper, every trespass. Some never return. Some return changed, carrying shadows in their eyes and whispers in their ears. And some, perhaps, become part of the forest itself, forever wandering the hidden hollows. Welcome to Dark Whispers, where the mountains keep their secrets, and the line between the living and the lost is thinner than the fog that curls around the ridges at night. Step lightly, listen closely, and pray you never hear your name called from the dark.